Okay, so thanks for the introduction. And of course, I'm not from Hindu extraction. I don't come from India. And so I don't have the historic or the awareness of what historically Ravan or Maya might mean. So I went on internet to see if I could find something that was actually precise, because I only know Ravan and Maya from what Baba says and what I have been told. And I saw in Madhuban the burning of Ravan at a certain point in the village. And so that gave me the idea of what it meant to burn the statue of Ravan with the 10 heads, which means the five vices of in the female expression and the five vices in the male expression. And when I looked at Maya, they gave me on internet the civilization of the Mayas in South America. So I have no information on her personally. Not being Indian, it's difficult for me to really know what all of this is, but my understanding of Maya is that she is more the let's say the vices or the negativity, the weaknesses within. And Ravan is more the five vices that we know, which are lust, anger, greed, ego, and attachment. And I think it's right to enumerate them. The vices are suggested to us through our sense organs, basically. And then they come into expression. So the mechanisms of the vices is something that has existed since the beginning of the Copper Age, as we know, when the soul lost its capacity to be soul conscious, that it didn't have that awareness of being a soul anymore and considered itself to be a body. And from there started all the problems that we had, and not so much the fights. I mean, we accepted Ravan and we accepted the vices to start with, but it was only afterwards when the suffering became greater as the cycle went on that it became important to, in some way, stop those vices. And there the religions came in. Now, if you are part of, let's say, Christianity, because you are maybe European and you were brought up with Christian values, you will see that Christianity does a lot to threaten, to frighten people into following certain codes of conduct that religion is proposing. And in many ways, rightly so. But you see, none of these, what I would say, rules really last very long. Because I think Ravan has has become more powerful. There we are. Maya and Ravan have become much more powerful in the last 100 or 200 years, very clearly. And so you need to have a different approach. And Baba's approach, of course, is to completely cut away any what I call half measures and insists on perfect purity that will help us regain the clarity and the strength that will permit us to fight Ravan and Maya. Now, Maya, as I said, was, I think, more the way I see it. And I won't challenge people who understand deeply what the word Maya means. My understanding is, let's say, to divide it up, like Ravan is the vices. Maya is what we have inside, which is an illusion, which is incorrect. And they are mechanisms that we have that come from experiences of fear or suffering that are basically within us, that we are carrying within us from a long time. And we have created these mechanisms to protect ourselves, to avoid having further suffering. And Maya comes about thinking things that are one way, when in fact they are a completely different way. And hence the illusion. Maya is, as Baba defines it, is an illusion. We think one thing, and in fact, the situation is different. Now, the five vices are omnipresent right now. I mean, they in the world today. No one is exempt, which is, actually quite reassuring. We're all in the same boat, I would say. Now, how we express these vices, of course, is very personal, and it depends on our own sanskars, our own personality. Now, Baba underlines, the first vice that he underlines is lust. And in many ways, very rightly so, because lust has many very different parts to it. Now, the lust, a few days ago, Baba did a murli where he spoke only about lust, and you almost had the impression at the end of the murli that you could go to the golden age with all your selfishness and your arrogance and all your ego and whatever you liked, and would get away with it. But then the next day, he spoke about all the other vices. I don't know if you remember those two mulis, but they came one after the other. And so we have to conquer lust, and lust, because the lust is the main vice. That's the one that touches every single one of us, because it is linked, obviously, to procreation. And that has touched over the 84 births. It has absolutely touched everyone. Now, of course, obviously, in the golden and silver ages, the vice of lust does not exist. But that is what is actually interesting, is that in the Catholic religion, they have the concept of the fallen angel. Lucifer, who is the Catholic vision of Ravan or Satan, is originally was an angel. So, in fact, lust starts off in a relationship of love. At the Golden Age, lust as a vice does not exist. And so this is why it is so unusual, with the other vices. And of course, it also has been part of our lives, but it involves two different people, basically. For example, which greed does not. Now, I'll give you an example for that. If you have a moment of greed and you're staring at a very nice cake, a very nice cream cake or pizza or something you want to eat, and then all of a sudden you decide that it would be better not to eat it, and so you renounce. The pizza or the cake doesn't follow you into the next door room. It doesn't follow you around. You see, this is the big difference between a vice that is to do with such a close relationship with another person or other people, and something that is like greed, which is, depends very much on you. If you want to eat the cake, It's up to you to choose whether you're going to, and there you have to understand whether actually it's hunger or whether it is greed. Now, Baba did a whole thing on the Murli on that this morning, which was actually quite interesting. Now, to finish off on the vice of lust, in the Iron Age, it has become extremely violent, and almost all women who get murdered are murdered by either their husbands or a past boyfriend or a boyfriend. And this is the feminist side that they call it. So it is a vice that has created an enormous amount of violence. Now, anger, for example, erupts with selfishness or a lack of tolerance. People feel maybe that they have a right to be angry. Why not? And that it is to a certain extent justified. But of course, it can lead to war, to situations of great suffering, and painful relationships when there is anger. Now, greed basically comes from the fear of not having enough. But then, if you don't have enough and you are hungry, like it was interesting in the Murli this morning, because Baba put sort of hunger and greed together. And in a lot of societies, if you steal food because you are hungry, people are not surprised. They very possibly would not even call the police, because if you're hungry and you satisfy a basic physical need, people don't see it in the same way. They don't see it as greed. And this means that it is very interesting for us to understand, when is my greed actually the vice of greed, or whether it's hunger. And if you're interested to actually know that, some years ago, I used to diet. And I used to use a diet where I only drank liquids. And I used to drink liquids for about 10 days. I never ate for about 10 days. And this was an extremely healthy diet, which fed you. You never were meant to feel hungry. And while I was at Kasasanga during this diet, I used to sit at table with the other people who were eating, and I would wonder whether, not having eaten for 10 days, I would feel hungry. And was it hunger, or was it just that I liked the look of what was on their plates and I would have liked to have eaten it? And in this way, I realized, I got to understand what it feels like to actually ask the body whether it's hungry, or what it feels like when the body actually is not hungry, but it is just greedy. So this was an interesting experience. I mean, I think for all of these things, all of the vices, we have to look to our own experience, because we can talk a lot about them, but our own experience is what will really teach each one of us. Now, this means that, we need to understand how Ravan and Maya work through us. In what way do Ravan and Maya work through me? What opportunities do they have? Now, I could question, am I lazy, for example? Now, laziness and negligence are not vices, actually, but they are things that will open the door to vices. You've got to be very careful. And if you are lazy, and your tendency is laziness, well, the chances are that you could make a joke of it, but it means you won't wake up early enough to catch Ravan in his ways of behaving. Yeah. You have to be on the ball. You have to be very awake and very aware. Otherwise, you won't catch him. Now, what is my level of determination, for example? To what level, what is my level of energy? Am I an energetic sort of person? So it's important to strengthen your determination. You know, you've got two sides of this. First of all, being aware and catching Ravan or Maya and the weaknesses that might evolve so that I know where they are. And then the other thing is to strengthen your determination by checking your own form of self-respect. I believe personally that self-respect has a lot to do with it. I mean, there are times when I honestly, this was way before Ghana, I must admit, I thought, how come certain people can allow themselves to do these things that were basically quite negative, and that I won't allow myself to do it? Now, and I thought at the time that I was stupid and that I was missing out maybe on something. But there was always a little voice inside me, which I would call my resolve, if you like, which meant that my self-respect did not want to bow down to that kind of behavior, which I didn't think was very elevated or very nice. So a lot depends on what your vision of yourself actually is, as to how easily you will give in to Ravan's manipulations. Now, to what an extent, for example, do I identify with some of the vices and say to myself, oh, well, you know, that's just the way I am. It's part of my identity. You know, a bit of greed or a tendency to have attachment, for example. I might, to what an extent do I realize it is dangerous? How dependent am I on others for my emotional stability, for example? That is something that is very basic. It depends on how strong I am, how independent I am. And all of this will allow you, I mean, all of this breaking down would allow you maybe to accept these vices as something that's necessary for your own life, you know, for your well-being, even. The idea of, you know, not having that vice or giving it up might be extremely difficult to consider. Some people are very, very attached to doing things in groups, for example. They don't, solitude or loneliness is a fear they have. Of course, obviously, there will be good things in groups, but there could be also the lurking of Maya in groups too. And so what would I use in the place? I mean, I need a strength, a power, a virtue to replace the vice that I am willing to give up. Because you can't just tear holes in yourself. I mean, this is very important. If you just remove this and remove that and remove the other, you will end up like a piece of Gruyere cheese with holes in it. And you will feel extremely ill at ease. If you're going to remove something, make sure you've got something to replace it. Now, do this structurally, carefully, thinking, okay, what would work if I used one of Baba's virtues? So you start developing the virtue, and then when it is time, when you feel you've developed the virtue, you give away the vice. And having replaced it before you've torn it away, you will feel much more at ease. Now, a bit of arrogance, for example, there's another vice. I mean, a bit of arrogance might seem very difficult to give up, because arrogance is what actually permits you to get things the way you want them, to get your own way, as we say in English. And I mean, I had a very powerful experience of that in Milan train station many years before, when I was traveling with my mother, and we had a very early train and a lot of baggage. We were going skiing, and there was a massive amount of baggage. But at that time of the morning, there were no porters. And this was years ago. And I made a scene at the baggage counter. I made an absolute scene, and I told the man, I'm taking that, that one of those little push carts that they have to put baggage on. I said, I'm taking that push cart and I'm going to take my baggage to the train, and you will find the push cart on that platform. And of course, no, you can't do this, and it's illegal and it's not allowed, etc. And I made a scene that was frightening because I knew it was the only way we would be able to get the train. And I did. I guess I just scared the wits out of the baggage people. They let me do it. And I did exactly what I said, got on the train, loaded all the baggage. My mother was extremely silent. And we sat down, the train departed. And my mother looked at me and she said, I've never seen that in you. Where did that come from? And I said, well, I just figured that if I didn't pull a scene, it wouldn't happen. And it needed to happen. We needed to be able to get the baggage to the train. So there are times when I suppose arrogance or anger have been very useful. And that was one of those times. Am I willing to give up that power of getting my own way through arrogance, for example? Now, there are, of course, being the incarnation of determination with sweetness is much more, at least for me, would have been much more difficult to have produced. I did not have the capacity or Baba's virtues in those days. I was a teenager. But the scene was so incredible that it remained in my mind. And I would say that probably all of you can remember certain moments in your life if you think about the vices and how they have taken you in, and you have used it. And then, of course, ego. Ego in Latin, you say ego sum means I am. It is the expression of I, quite clearly. Now, Baba says the body conscious I must be given. And anything that is a physical consciousness of I, in other words, ego, needs to be given up. Of course, all devices touch on body consciousness. Of course, the more we become self-conscious, the more the vices will tend to diminish in strength and be much more controllable, and we will see them coming. Now, there are many more reasons to keep the vices alive, I should say, than there are incentives to remove them. The vices have been actually quite useful. I mean, that's why they've been around so long, and this is why Ravan insists so much, So to what an extent, another question I must ask myself, to what an extent do I deep down refuse Ravana Maya, feel distaste for my own weaknesses? Do I have distaste? Now, again, there, like I said, religion has shamed us, has threatened all kinds of things like hell and damnation. I went to a Catholic convent as a child, and so I heard all about hell. They had very little understanding about what heaven might look like, because their whole history starts at Adam and Eve, where Adam and Eve are the first ones that make that ultimate mistake of body consciousness, start us on the path of lust, and we all got chucked out of the paradise at that moment. Now, my question to the nuns in those days, which seemed to me a very logical question, I was about 10. I said to the nuns, what about Adam and Eve's grandparents? They must have had ancestors. Surely they lived a perfect life. They didn't make mistakes. They weren't kicked out of paradise. What did that look like? And neither the nuns nor the priest could answer me. And the question remained till I got to the Brahma Kumaris, because the Catholics have a piece of history, a piece of the cycle that is missing. So Ravan, I see now, Ravan is very clearly, notwithstanding all the religions threatening people, the religions are losing power. I'm seeing that. But I'm seeing that Ravan is very clearly, gaining terrain around the world. He seems to be doing very well with more and more selfishness and arrogance and deceit. And actually, all of this negativity is almost gaining applause, if you know what I mean. So you wonder what benefit there is in actually giving up the vices. And this it sounds like a crazy question, but it's actually important, because threatening and fear actually basically doesn't work. We've seen that. You need to have the right motivation. Where does my motivation come from? Now, here with, like with a donkey, for example, if you want a donkey to move forward, donkeys are famous for this, you can beat him at the back, and because of the pain, the donkey will move forward. But pain is not a good motivation. It's not a pure motivation, because it doesn't empower you, and you won't use it regularly. You might use it once or twice if you feel it's really necessary. But if you hang a carrot in front of the donkey's nose, he moves forward because he is incentivized to eat the carrot. Now, that is a very good way of getting the donkey to move. Now, what is the carrot for me? What incentivizes me to move forward in Baba's knowledge and to reject the vices and acquire virtues? Because it's not only just a question of making holes in ourselves and chucking out the negative. We have to, first of all, find out what we're going to fill those holes with. And so I need to find something that really motivates me. And of course, Baba speaks a lot about the Golden Age and Lakshmi and Narayan. And there, of course, it's the same problem for me as Ravan and Maya. I mean, I don't come from that cultural background, and I only really know what I've been told about Lakshmi and Narayan, and what basically I've been told by Baba and by the family, and what I can understand. But to be very honest, not having grown up in that culture, I really don't understand it. And I don't know what Lakshmi and Narayan, apart from understanding basically that is the form of human perfection. But I'm not interested in the way it is presented. Like, I'm not interested in the velvet and the jewels and the crowns and all of that kind of thing. It just does not inspire me personally. And this is very personal, actually. It is. It is. What I am interested in is their experience of life. What is life like at the Golden Age? And there you have to do a lot of deep thinking, of churning on what it might feel to live a pure life. Now, the absolute viceless life that you live and the very simple joy that comes from something very easygoing, something very simple, is what I find gives meaning to my objective of the Golden Age if I want to motivate myself. And this, of course, means that you have to make an effort to uncover your the good in perfection. What does it mean to be good in perfection? People like very complicated things these days. One of the things that you will notice, if years ago, they, on the television for Christmas and New Year, I was watching actually, they showed some wonderful shows from the past that were very, 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 very famous and had been big, big successes. And I looked at all these shows, all in black and white, of course. And I looked at these shows and I thought, how could we possibly have thought that that was entertaining? It is so boring. Everything was so slow. And at the time, I was in show business at the time, and I asked someone about it, and they told me, the images now come much, much quicker. The human mind needs much faster stimuli. Otherwise, you will find it is boring. Now, I was thinking, yeah, we have become very, very complicated. And this, of course, not only is complicated, but it leads to confusion. We can't always be as linear and as clear as in our thinking as we would like to be. And of course, this is one of the opportunities for Ravan and Maya to play their games. Just looking, I mean, I personally tend to normally speak very fast. I tend to think very fast. There are a lot of people like that. And of course, I can understand that when Maya comes in there, before I actually pull on the brakes and catch her or catch Ravan, possibly something's happened. So this speeding up of our awareness and our consciousness has not really done us a lot of good. It's not helped us. But during lockdown, during COVID, of course, we were sitting at home, and I decided to do something that would inspire me. And I started researching on the computer, because that's all I had as company. I decided to research on the computer, research beauty. Now, beauty depends on the person who's looking or listening. The beauty is perceived in some way through the sense organs. And of course, the person who's perceiving is different. Each one of us is different. So each one of us perceives beauty in a different way, which is lovely. And I just looked at beauty in nature, beauty in thoughts and concepts, beauty in art, beauty in music, which came through the ears. I listened to a lot of music during that time, but the kind of music that I appreciate, the kind of music that I love. And I realized what that perception of beauty for me was doing to my state of consciousness. It was spectacular. I felt no boredom. I felt incredibly light. I felt incredibly close to Baba, funnily enough, although I was certainly not reading Brahmin classes at that time. It just, and then I thought about it. Beauty is omnipresent at the Golden Age. And without sort of actually thinking about the Golden Age, I had projected myself into a perception of what the Golden Age might feel like for me. And I don't mean, just physical beauty, of course, obviously. Although you learn so many surprising things. I mean, who would have known that there are whole races, clans, people who physically are intrinsically extremely beautiful? I mean, I had never heard, just telling you like this, I had never heard of the Ethiopian Jews. Who were they? I had no idea. Well, I clicked on this, and as a race, they are stunningly beautiful. Old people, young people, women, men, children, beautiful. I mean, you learn so many things that are surprising. There's so many surprising things that open you up to all the things you don't know, that you've not perceived. And of course, a lot of it will bring my perception of beauty, brings, I find, a lot of harmony into me. It wipes away ill feelings, negativity. It just puts me on a different level. So it helped me an enormous amount. And I found it extremely motivating. So we need to be motivated by, for example, our original complete state, rather than the impossibility of becoming perfect that comes from the idea of original sin. Rather than looking at the weaknesses, which, if you come from, like myself, a Christian background, you might be kind of obsessed with the weaknesses you have. I know you're not strong enough to do this, and you're never going to be good enough to do that. But where Baba just wipes all of that aside as if it was not really that useful, because he's aiming at creating a golden age, and all he's looking for is what kind of qualities do you have? What potential do you have that can be useful for the golden age? And he looks at that. That is what he sees. That is the identity that he refers to you as. He doesn't refer to you as a name, of course. He looks at you as a soul. He knows the body has a name, and that's it. So we at times look at the wrong thing. We get absolutely obsessed with the difficulties that we have, vices that we have. And originally, of course, we are pure. It's not that we have original sin, like the Christians might say. We are originally pure. And we need to step up to that, our own form of the future perfection, and not be influenced by negativity from our background. Maya, for example, she comes up more from past fear, past hurt. And this means that we are still seeing things through distorted glasses, distorted lenses. And we see or feel things according to these past experiences. And I do firmly believe that there is a lot of this still in the BK family. We haven't looked at it deeply. A lot of us know it's there. When in America, before Guyana, I was a dancer and I was hoping to change careers and be a psychologist, actually. And I sort of looked at things on that level and was really shocked, but, shocked but not surprised, put it that way, of how over 90% of families are dysfunctional. In other words, the roles that they are playing are not accurate and they're not healthy. They're not right. And this will hurt the soul. And this will bring us to believe things that are inaccurate of ourselves. And we will relate to others in this inaccurate identity. And this will create fear and difficulty in relationships. And so this is the illusion. I mean, I see Maya. I mean, I'm expressing Maya, and you may have other ideas of what Maya might be. But I'm looking at it as this illusion of not seeing things that really the way we should, the way they really are. Of course, the first illusion is that we are a body. That was the first thing that came into our awareness, and it became the source, I would say, of all our negativity and our misunderstanding. Because it is so totally the contrary to what is true, as Baba tells us. The first illusion that you're a body, well, this makes us see things quite differently to spiritual truths. And we fear death, but actually, for a soul, death is impossible. Now, that is a pretty dramatic difference. The difference is not subtle. Yeah. It's dramatic. And if you can't die, you have to look at life, or lives at that point, with a completely different vision. It's absolutely surprising. And so the thing about Ravan and Maya is that they do fool us, because we fall back into the natural feeling of body consciousness. So to what an extent do I see Maya coming from afar? Baba stimulates us to be awake and alert to Maya coming, or, of course, obviously, how Ravan is using my sanskars in a viceful way. I have to be aware of these things and keep my eyes very, very wide open. And so to what an extent do I see Maya and Ravan coming? Baba's not afraid of the fact that we do have weaknesses. I think this is, again, I mean, I live in Rome, and so I, of course, obviously have a lot of students who are Catholic and have a lot of culture that is influenced by the Catholic religion. And there is a real fear of God. I've noticed on several occasions when I have given the 7 days course, and when I've arrived at the course where you talk about God and you talk about Baba, and people start to express discomfort Women will open their bags and look for a handkerchief or something. I mean, they will move around on their chairs. You can see that they are ill at ease with the idea of God. And, you know, this is us looking at where their Mayas may be. Because when you're teaching, I mean, this is a completely different subject, really. But when you're teaching, you have to be aware of where other people's vices are, possibly, and where they're at. I mean, you can't give Gyan in the same way to someone who is in fear of God as you can to someone who actually admires or is devotional towards God. Um, and so there we have to discover, basically our strengths, because Baba is not afraid of our weaknesses. He trusts in our qualities. This is what is so beautifully creative. I mean, he's not going to be creative and create a wonderful golden age if he just looks at our weaknesses. It's not going to happen. Baba is extremely logic. We are much less logic. And he just looks at our potential and hiding these sort of things. But hiding is not a worthwhile thing to do because he's not bothered by it. Why would I hide my vices or my Mayas if he's not worried about them? This was something that I was thinking about one day when I was meditating. And I was thinking, why are we, of course, this is something that comes from our devotional paths, where we were afraid of God. We weren't afraid of Maya or Ravan, we were afraid of God. And we were afraid of his criticism. And, like the idea was that you either made the grade, you were either good enough and you went to the right and you went to heaven, or you didn't make the grade and you went to the left and you went to hell. But that sort of thing can impact your subconscious mind. And we have to also look to see how many of these false beliefs we still are carrying with us. Because maybe we don't. Maybe some of you have no false beliefs about yourself. Any lack of self-respect, what is it based on? For example, what is it based on? Is it based on something that someone said years ago? Or is it based on your own understanding? And of course, if you understand, you can lack self-respect, but you do have a lot of qualities too. To what an extent can you look at your qualities, write them down in a notebook, just write them down, and weigh them up against the defects, and realize that those qualities are not as functional when they are somewhat impure than when they're pure. When they're pure, they become really powerful. It's just a question, really, it is a question of purity, because within us, we do have the traces of our complete form. We have used them. We used them at the beginning of this cycle. We used them in the last cycle, and we will return to using them again in the next cycle. We don't have to invent it from scratch. It's already there. All we have to do is clean it out and trust it. To what an extent, we did a beautiful exercise in Gubyo in the last weekend. The conversation, you can try it sometime, a conversation with our complete form. And my complete form said to me, this was interesting. I thought, wow, that's an interesting. My complete form said to me, why don't you trust me? Now, I don't know. I always feel that there is something that I have not understood, that I have forgotten, that I haven't done. And so consequently, I have these doubts. But the funny thing is that our complete form has no doubts. So there we are. We have to discover, in this way, we can discover our strengths.
So, Wendy, it was wonderful, especially what you shared about self-respect. Well, the time is almost finished, but we don't want to leave you. Uh, I don't see any questions here. The exercises you said at the end about talking your complete form is really very interesting, and I think everyone in the centers we should do that, and not even at the center, even by ourselves.
You can do it by yourself. It's done in silence.
Yeah,
You don't really need, I mean, I'll tell you, it is something that is done logically. And the process is that you take two chairs, one for you and one for your perfect form, which remains empty. When the perfect form or the complete form is talking to you, you sit in that chair. When you are talking, you sit in your chair. And that is actually very important to change your state of consciousness, to be aware that these are two different things. It's subtle, but it's very useful. And you can do that for as long as your conversation keeps going, but make sure that you write it down. Right. This is a slow process. It's a slow conversation, but the result is beautiful. It is surprising because this is why you need to read it back, you see. So you've got to write it.